This is Becoming UnDone.
The Dobbertin Surface Orbiter. 17,000 pounds of aluminum and stainless steel, able to navigate the roughest turf and the highest surf. Rick spent years cutting, welding, and fabricating. With his task complete, Rick set off on a 2-year adventure. The orbiter crossed long stretches of open ocean. Rick's voyage covered 33,000 miles in 28 countries, and his monster became the first car to transit the Panama Canal.
And there's a lot of guys and builders. I don't consider myself in the top thing, because I know what went into it, and I'm pretty much just an average person.
My name is Rick Dobbertin, and I am undone.
Hey there, and welcome to Becoming UnDone. I'm Toby Brooks, a speaker, author, and professor, but maybe most importantly, a relentless learner, fascinated by what makes high achievers tick. For over 2 decades, I've worked as an athletic trainer and strength coach, from high schools to pro sports and all points in between. I've seen the wins, the losses, and the moments that fall somewhere in the middle, the ones that break us down, only to build us up. Becoming UnDone is a space for those who dare bravely, risk deeply, and grow relentlessly. Each week I bring a new guest to explore how life's toughest setbacks can become the fuel that drives us to success. Here, we don't shy away from failures. We dig into them. This show is my way of sharing insights into the mindsets that set high achievers apart, lessons that have changed me, but they're also helping me on my journey to understand and share what it means to truly become undone and come back stronger. I'd like to emphasize that this show is entirely separate from my role at Baylor University, but it's my attempt to apply what I've learned and what I'm learning, and to share with others about the mindsets of high achievers. I'm glad you've joined me for yet another episode of Becoming UnDone, where we dive deep into the untold stories of those who push boundaries, taken risks, and refuse to settle for ordinary. Today, I'm thrilled to sit down with a true pioneer in the world of engineering and customization, the king of Pro Street, someone who's been a master at transforming wild dreams into concrete realities, Rick Dobbertin. Rick's journey isn't just about building incredible machines. It's about challenging the limits of what's possible, reinventing what a single person can accomplish, and pushing through relentless obstacles. From his groundbreaking Nova and Pontiac J2000 Pro Street builds, to the Dobbertin Orbiter and his wild amphibious hydrocar, Rick's life is a testament to innovation, grit, and the courage to blaze a unique trail. Today, Rick's an entrepreneur and an inventor, and his company, Dobbertin Performance, builds and ships high-performance components all over the globe. The same globe Rick once traveled by land and sea in an unprecedented adventure unlike any in human history. Whether you're a student of engineering, a fan of the unconventional, or just in need of some inspiration to take on your own challenges, this episode is for you. Get ready for an unforgettable conversation about resilience, reinvention, and the drive to make the impossible come to life. Let's get into it. This is Becoming UnDone, episode 105, with Rick Dobbertin. Joining me today is Rick Dobbertin. Rick, welcome to the show.
Well, glad to be here finally. It's good we could finally mesh our schedules together and get together with this.
Absolutely. Well, this one's a special treat for me because it's not often you get to interview your heroes, and you're certainly in that category. I first encountered your work at the age of 10. I was big into the Street Machine National scene, and you were prolific in that space. And so we'll get into that. But as we were talking before the show, it certainly escalated from there. You go from building world-class hot rods to being a world explorer. So I want to start at the beginning, though. What did you want to be growing up, and why as a kid?
I always liked mechanical stuff, and my dad worked for General Motors. He was in the finance end of it. So he was, to this day, I have never been late on a payment for anything, anywhere, period. So I know he'd come back and say, you're late on that. So there's 2 different ways people look at something that they really like, and they'd say, I'd like to build something like that, or somebody that just wants to try something completely different. And both of them have their merits and their drawbacks, because a lot of times I'm in the middle of a project that's never been done before, and I think, oh, this is why nobody's done it before.
So take us back to the beginning. You grew up, I know you were in New York and Virginia, and when I first came across your work, the Nova and then the J2000, you were a speed shop owner in Virginia. So kind of talk me through your life up to that point when the Street Machine Nationals became kind of front and center in what you were doing.
Well, let's see, my first car was a Renault, one of those little junk things. I bought it for $35, worked on it for half a summer, and sold it for about $40. I never did get it running. And then I guess my first real hot rod was a 65 or 66 Corvair. We bought one, my dad and I, he kind of helped me with it. We ended up putting a turbo engine in it, the Corvair turbocharged engine, and fixing it up and striping it. And then I found what they call a Fitch Sprint. I guess John Fitch was a racer, and he built these really cool-looking fiberglass add-ons for the roof to make the thing look like a fastback and everything. I got one of those, striped it, and then I was off and running. From there to 427 Chevelle, and then my biggest regret now is I had a 67 Corvette coupe, silver with side pipes, all factory stuff, 427, 435. This is for a 16 or 17-year-old kid. So the fact that I'm still alive is I can't believe it sometimes. But I was the typical 16-year-old 427 vet. It's a dangerous combination. Never killed anybody that I know of. Never actually wrecked it or anything. But then I worked at a place in a construction supply place, and there was another guy there with a vet, and he was the big guy, everybody looked up to him for the vet. He had a C1, like a 60 Corvette or something. It was a really nice car. But of course, when I came up with 427, everybody said, ooh, that's really something. So I have no proof on this, but I know what happened. He loosened all my lug nuts on the back right tire where I parked. Because on the way home that night, the car started wobbling. I was with a friend, and it started to shake. And he looked out the window and said, "Wow, something's." He didn't even get the sentence out. The wheel came off, and it took the whole rear fender and everything right off the car. Dropped it right on the ground. Yeah, it could have been a horrible thing, but it opened up the door. I thought, well, I'm not going to put it together stock. I'm going to customize it. So it ended up with a couple four-barrel tunnel ram, flared the fenders. So I'm actually one of the guys that made the 67s more valuable because I really butchered it. It looked good, and for the time, that's what everybody was doing. They'd say a stock vet. But so I had that for quite a while and ended up selling it. And I had probably 6 other 427 Corvette coupes through the years. I just really liked them, and you could buy these things mint condition. That car had like 11,000 miles on it. I bought it for $2,200.
Wow.
Today it'd be maybe a $250,000 car.
Mm-hmm.
But, so don't ever come to me with a, investment question.
Well, it's like Warren Johnson used to say, if you want to become a millionaire in drag racing, it's easy. Just start with $1 billion.
Right. I have heard that, but it's been years, and that is a good one.
For Rick, it was an early fascination with all things mechanicals that pointed his life in the direction of cars from the start. In a previous interview with him, he recounted to me how he can vividly remember the first time he felt a wrench in his hand, and he liked the smooth, cool, polished steel. His exact quote was something along the lines of, "I suspect if I'd felt that and thought, ooh, yuck, that my life would have been completely different." Indeed. While a custom classic vet was nothing to sneeze at for a 16-year-old, it would pale in comparison to the mechanical creations he'd build in the future, starting with an IMSA-style Monza next.
I saw the IMSA Monza cars that were racing on the track. That had that flares in the back and the front. The front's about 8 inches wider than a regular one, and the back's about 20 inches wider than a regular one. And I thought they were really cool, so I had this idea to build a Monza, custom car, but using only Chevrolet parts. Mm-hmm. So I ordered a brand new Monza, which was only about $5,000 then. It came with a V8, a 262, I think. So the engine swap was simple. We put the 350 in it. I found an old cross ram out of a 69 Camaro. Put that on. I think it was 69. Got the fender flare kits, got all that stuff, and built the whole car using only genuine Chevrolet parts, basically, except for like the wheels. I had American 200S's on it and stuff. And it was a neat car, you know, and of course it still sat up like it was a 4-wheel drive vehicle, which I look back to and like, oh my God. And in fact, moving on to the current time, I'm jumping a lot of years. I own that car again. Out of the blue, this guy a few years ago said, "Hey, I own your old car. Would you be interested in buying it?" So I thought, no. And then it was like, oh my God, that's my firstborn. I've got to have it. So I bought it.
So talk to us a little bit about the Nova and how it burst on the scene in the early 80s and really kind of brought you into the spotlight in the magazine scene.
When I had my speed shop, I wanted to have the speed shop kind of really push turbocharging and supercharging. Not that I knew that much about it, but it was a pretty easy swap, and there was a guys from Rotomaster that were trying to set up shops to do the turbocharging. So we got involved with that program. And then I built a couple turbocharged cars. We had a 78 Monza, kept the body stock with the V6 emblems and all that stuff, and dropped in a 350 with a turbo and everything, and it was just a cool little sleeper. I mean, it was fast and you know, it was so unassuming, and you'd just drive around, and then somebody with their 240Z or their Corvette or something, we'd just cruise down and both hit the gas, and I'd just pull away from them like he would stop. So it went from there to the Nova. I started a speed shop called AA Speed and Custom Discounters. So we got the business going, and we wanted to specialize in superchargers and turbochargers. So we had some shirts made up, and on the front it said, "For the best blown jobs in town." And then on the back it said AA Speed and Custom. Yeah. AA Speed and Custom and Turbodynamics. And so I had those shirts just hang up, and they sold pretty good. Sold quite a few of them. And I was looking at the shirt one day, and I thought, turbochargers, superchargers, why don't I put both on one car? I mean, there's no reason you can't do that. Everybody still thinks it doesn't work, but it does work. It's just like a 2-stage air compressor in a gas station. One cylinder pumps it up to a certain pressure, then it goes into the next stage, and it pumps it up again. Mm-hmm. So you actually have to be careful that you don't overdo it, or you'll blow the head gaskets right out. Anyway, I thought a 65 Nova, and then the 65 Nova I loved those cars because when I was still in high school, there was a guy down, I don't know, a few miles from my house that had this gasser. It was like a 62 Nova raised way up, and it was called Animal Man. And I wanted to buy it. He put it up for sale, and I wanted to buy it, and he didn't have any other buyers. I almost talked to him into co-signing a loan with me. But he didn't want to co-sign a loan on his own car, so he did not know my background. He really got paid every penny, but that didn't work. So somebody else bought it. But I always loved the Novas, the boxiness of them and stuff. So I found this. I started looking for Novas in Hemmings Motor News, I guess it was a big thing back then. And I went as far as Maine. I lived in Virginia and went as far as Maine for all these people saying, "This is cherry, there's not a bit of Bondo in it." You drive for 8 hours to get up there and it's just a rust bucket. Mm-hmm. I mean, this happened a dozen times. Then I went to Hershey, the big swap meet, and sitting in the parking lot, not in the corral or anything, was this pristine, perfect 21,000 mile little old lady car, literally. And the guy didn't want much for it, so I bought it, and that was it. So the way I decided to lay out the engine was to have the butterflies work, even though there was a block off in the back because the air was already pressurized at that point from the turbos. So the air would come in through the turbos, get pressurized, run up to the blower, and then get pressurized again and down into the engine. And I didn't want the turbochargers to show, so with the hood down, it looks like a 671 blown car, and everybody comes up and looks at it, and then you open the hood, and there's 2 turbos under there to boot. And that was the thing. I had never been to Street Machine Nationals, but tried to do it, and everybody really liked it. So it won pretty much everything at the event that year. And the next year we went back and it won again.
Yeah. And so this to me is really kind of the genesis. You don't get into this level of building without having cut your teeth on some other projects, but a project of this magnitude certainly put you in elite company, and you're kind of known by this spirited competition that's brought it up. But with that Nova, was it premeditated? Like you knew from day one what you were going to end up with as a finished project? Or a lot of builders just kind of start and just kind of work away at it, and one thing leads to another, but that's really not your MO.
No, I did it mainly when I was doing the J2000. Years later, I made this list officially, but I guess with the Nova also, I tried to decide what makes a Pro Street car a Pro Street car. It's the small front tires, the huge rear tires, the engine sticking out of the hood, the roll cage, all that stuff. So I wanted to look at cars in the magazines and see what they had, and then try to say, okay, this is where it's reached. What would make it a little more upgraded from these cars? And then I really wanted to go after that Street Machine of the Year thing. And then when Scott Sullivan, who's an incredible builder, built that blue Nova and was Street Machine of the Year, I thought, oh, that's just great. A blue Nova, and I've got a blue Nova that I want to go to do the same thing. Fortunately, it was okay to do that. But people used to come up and make jokes like, hey, what, do you got to build a blue Nova to be Street Machine of the Year? I'll tell you, one time these three guys came up to me at an event, and they said, oh my God, it's him. And I looked over and they said, oh my God, you're like a god to us. And then this one guy goes, Blue Nova. I was not with the car. He said, Blue Nova. And I said, yeah. And he said, Pro Street all the way. And I said, yeah. He says, Street Machine of the Year. I said, yeah. And he goes, oh, we're so happy to meet you, Mr. Sullivan. And then they all laughed, and I thought, that was so excellent. It was just so funny, that they planned that,
Well executed.
Yeah, that was funny. But I did find today, it's just like drag racing. It's not a participant sport anymore. It's a spectator sport. Because who can afford to build these cars? You can't afford to put in, 4,000 hours to build them, and you sure can't pay labor in 4,000 hours to build them.
Right.
It's too bad, but it's, it's the way everything goes, it seems. I mean, who knew basketball players would get millions of dollars a game,
So that raises a great point. So the Nova, the fabrication in this build is unlike anything we've seen up to this point. Custom plenums and polished this and, full roll cage. Where did you learn and discover and refine your fabrication skills along the way? A speed shop back in the day is known as a place to go to buy bolt-ons. This was not a bolt-on build.
No, but, there were so many things coming out for turbocharging, and back at that point, you could go to BDS for the blower setup. That was pretty much the stock setup from them, with the blower and everything. And just combining, it's got a lot more components. It's got components from both worlds, with the turbocharging and the supercharging, and that's what kind of did it for the car. Everybody remembers it for that. And I still get people that say, "There's no way that can work." And I said, okay. And when I used to take it on the show car tour, I remember one time the car didn't get the engine award and stuff, and the judge afterwards, I said, why, just curious. And he said, I ain't going to give the best engine to some car with a fake supercharger on it. And I said, it's not fake. He said, well, prove it. So I took the top off the thing and said, there's the rotors. And he goes, well, I'll be, you're right. I apologize. So then I went out in the parking lot and meticulously burned his car to the ground.
In your mind.
In my brain.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Now, I wrote an entire book about Rick and his contemporaries and the incredible times that were the Street Machine Nationals in my book, Sensory Overload. Available for purchase on my website, tobyjbrooks.com, by the way, shameless plug. Anyhow, this group of 5 or 6 guys started building progressively wilder and highly styled Pro Street cars, which, if you're unfamiliar, it's a street legal car or truck built to look and perform like an all-out drag race vehicle. Rick's Nova was a hit, But as the guys in the group started competing every year for the highly coveted Street Machine of the Year award, the stakes kept getting higher, and the bar kept getting raised. So Rick, being the fabrication expert and detail-obsessive craftsman that he was and is, a next build seemed inevitable. But what and how? That wasn't yet settled. A lot of times on this show, we talk about how failure can lead to success. But in your case, you have resounding success. And the curse sometimes of success is, well, what are you going to do next? And so you've spent thousands of hours and countless dollars on this car that is in all the magazines. It's known coast to coast. And in the midst of this arms race of Pro Street, you've got builders coming out with new things. And you get in your mind that, well, I'm going to up the ante. So talk me through how you went from the 65 to the J2000.
So after the Nova stuff died down, I got a call from John Asher, who was the editor of Carcraft magazine, and he said, if you build another car and it's up to snuff, I will put it on the cover of Carcraft and maybe even make it a 2-month article, because I hadn't seen that before. So I said, okay. So then the ball was in my court. I thought, what am I going to do? So I figured I'd start with the frame, do the full roll cage and everything. And then I'd paint it. And then I thought, wait a minute, I'm not going to paint it. I'll build the frame out of stainless steel and polish it. Little did I know that would ruin my life for about a month and a half. Just polishing that thing. I mean, even though the stainless is great, but to get to the point where the welds could be ground and stuff, everybody says, oh, you can't grind the welds. Well, these welds were like 3 or 4 layers deep, so I never got anywhere close to the actual weld that made, that held the parts together. I don't think I could run NHRA with it because you can't see the welds, but there's pictures in the magazines and stuff of these. So I decided to go with a stainless frame. And then Little John Butera, remember him?
Mm-hmm. The godfather of billet.
Yeah. He had gotten down and looked under the back of the Nova, and he said, wow, wall-to-wall tires. And I got down under there, and I looked, and I thought, well, there's still 16 inches between these. We can do better than that. So I got these really short axles made. In fact, that's kind of a funny story. When I decided I could get by with, they're about 11 inches. The axles themselves are 11 inches. And I was a dealer for strange axles. So when I put in an order one day, the guy had a Camaro and he wanted to get some shorter axles. And I ordered the axles, 26 inches or 24 inches. And I said, hey, when I got you on the phone, can you build like 11-inch axles? And the guy said, yeah, but what would you use it on? I said, well, I'm just curious how things. He says, yeah, we could do anything you wanted, but you gotta make sure you're getting those measurements right, And I said, yeah, that's fine. So 6 months later, when the business was going and the car was going, I called them back and I said, I'd like to order some like 11.5-inch axles for a Dana 60. And the guy said, hang on a minute. And he comes back and he says, we have some of those in stock. I have no reason. I have no idea why. But we've got some and we've had them here. And I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give them to you. I thought, don't say a word. Don't say a word. I said, really? Well, thank you. So he sent these things in. They'll both fit in a shoebox. I can put those in there.
Yeah. But if I remember right, you didn't just narrow the rear end. The actual pumpkin was narrowed as well.
Yeah, it had to be narrowed because, I had to grind some of that off because it just it was too wide, this cast part.
Right. So you're thousands of hours deep on this custom chassis, and I remember seeing build photos of it in the magazine. People were anticipating this thing. And I've heard the stories of the car and certainly seen the finished product. What was it like for you as a human being during the fabrication of this car?
I don't know. I take everything too personally, I think. I'd get up in the middle of the night. I think there'd be a problem. My speed shop was only about 4 miles away, so I'd go, oh my God, did I do this? I'll be right back. And I'd get in the car and look at it, play around with it at, from 2 to 3:30 in the morning. And it's obsessive. I was obsessed, and that's something I should tell people. I mean, don't let your marriage suffer and everything else because of a car. If you're single, let it ruin your life. You don't have to drag your whole family business down the drain with it. I didn't, I got obsessed with the car.
Yeah.
So,
and I remember reading the story, and again, I'm 10 years old, and I'm like, the author says something like, how many hours you put in. And once you grow up, you realize, wow, you were fully invested.
Yeah, I won't say anything about how I ran my credit card bill. That's what it did. I did pay them off, but it took a couple of years after the car was done to still pay off for the credit. And I sold a couple of other things. I think I sold the Monza. I still had that. I sold that.
I do recall they did where I grew up was 30 minutes, 45 minutes from the DuQuoin State Fairgrounds where the show was.
Oh, wow.
And they did a television feature on the local ABC affiliate to kind of promote the show. It was like a half-hour special. There was a local guy who had a Corvette, and you were interviewed, but I remember you rattling off statistics like an analytics professional would talking about baseball stats today. You knew the hour down to the hour and down to the penny of the investment. I was like, wow, this guy's like a mad scientist with a TIG welder, and you had a level of, dare I say, fanaticism to understanding every aspect of this build from start to finish.
My name is Rick Dobbertin. I'm from Springfield, Virginia, and this is a 1985 Pontiac J2000. We've done a little bit of work to it. It has a stainless steel frame. It's an aluminum small block Chevrolet, 350 cubic inch. It's got aluminum Brodex heads, 2 turbochargers, 2 superchargers, nitrous oxide. It runs off a Holley 1050 carburetor. All the frame itself stainless, the exhaust is stainless, all the running gear components are stainless steel. The rear wheels are 15 by 20s with a 15-inch dish on the front to give a real deep-looking thing. The tires measure 23.5 inches wide, 33 inches tall. There's only 8.25 inches between them. Front wheels are 15 3.5s. You're riding on Moroso front tires and Firestone rear tires.
How long did you spend in its making?
I spent 3 years, 4,720 hours logged in, and a cost of $37,020 and 5 cents. But who's counting?
You might have a car next to you where it's been in the family and we just kind of tinker on it every once in a while. That was not how you were operating.
Right. No, everybody compliments me on the welds. Oh, it's the best weld I've ever. I'm not the greatest welder in the world. Once you put on 3 or 4 layers of welds and get a die grinder in there to smooth them out and sand them and stuff, you can make any kind of weld look wonderful. Mine aren't horrible, but they're not. I look at some of these guys that weld headers up with drill thin wall tubing, and I think, how in the hell do you do that?
Yeah.
And but the finished result, was what we want. What I wanted. I wanted to blend them all because it's just something. And there's a lot of time that goes in, like the crossbars in the doors, to where they line up. You can't look at those crossbars and see which one is the one that goes all the way down and which one is split in half where it crosses over.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even sure which one's which. But that's what I wanted to do, not, because a lot of times it's real obvious.
Yeah.
But, it's obsessive compulsive disorder, probably. It's probably something, if I had taken the right pills, I wouldn't be doing it.
Well, I think I can speak for hot rodders everywhere in saying it was just an example of, it's almost like what you see in an Olympic athlete. Like, that's an example of someone who absolutely was obsessed with getting out every ounce of performance they could. You, on the other hand, were kind of showing what that could be in the artistry of an automobile and taken to its absolute extreme. And that was kind of the thought process behind the build. If fat tires are good, get the fattest tires you can. And if a tube chassis is good, make it look like it's chromed because it's all polished stainless. Everything about it was the next step. And some people would even say that it was the end of Pro Street because it was the car that you couldn't top. What would you say to those critics that said that the J2000 killed the Pro Street movement?
Well, I do remember one saying that I used through the years, and that's, if a little's good, then a lot is better, and too much is just right. I mean, it's an old saying. I didn't make it up. But,
no, I'm looking at photos on your website as you're talking, and it's just everything about this build is just, it's like, it's the extreme that you couldn't make this any more wild. And this is a car, right? This is not aircraft. This is not a boat. You're a car builder at this point in your career. And those skills that you're honing, polishing this stainless steel chassis and building an articulated body and all these things had never been done to cars before. But before I get too deep down that path, I mean, the J2000 literally goes around the world. You travel to Australia. You're seen coast to coast at major shows and magazines. You and your contemporaries are recognized as kind of rock stars of this scene. What was that like for you personally, coming from humble beginnings? You know, you're a speed shop owner, and now all of a sudden you're a recognized celebrity around the world in places.
I should have got a manager maybe too. No, I don't see myself that way. I see some of the other guys that way, like good friends. I think we're all good friends. This is back still when the cars weren't $1 million invested in stuff and people could be friends. They weren't corporation to corporation building these things.
Yeah.
And I think that might be one of the last things to where people got away from doing them themselves, and the rich guys still, you know, well, I'll take one of those and one of those and put them in that.
So the car goes to Australia and back, and you've been down this road before where you build this game-changing car, and as you're showing it, and now at this point, this is number 2, instead of appreciating the thousands of hours of fabrication time and the blood, the sweat, the tears, the innovation that went into this, people are like, well, what are you going to build next? Mm-hmm. Where are you at psychologically during this time? Like, are you thinking, yeah, I'm going to build something to top this? Or are you like, I'm out. This tapped me out. I've got to go another direction.
See, this was during my shock therapy session. Just kidding. Well, I talked to people and they wanted me to take the car to Sweden. I had a guy to Sweden, and another guy wanted it. Oh, we're German. We put on this great show, and I'd like you to have it there and all that stuff. And I thought, hey, why don't I build a car, like an amphibious car, and I could just drive it to these shows. I could drive across America. I could get in the ocean and New York and go over to England and all that kind of stuff, which today you'd just be shot. You know, you can't do that. I mean, of course you could stay right here in the States and be shot. It's terrible. I don't want to get political with anything, but back then it still wasn't mega dollars. The J2000, I think, all total, I don't know if I have my list here, but it was I believe it was in the mid $30,000 range. Mm-hmm. And the Nova was a lot less than that. But you're not paying $100 an hour for labor.
Right.
You know, that's the thing that...
And that's $80. Yeah. I think I did the research for the book and adjusted for inflation. I mean, and you have sponsorship deals and things like that, but it was a sizable investment in parts, but the vast majority of the value in that build was the expertise and the fabrication skills that you put into it.
Well, whenever I'm depressed, I'm going to have to call you. Tell me that part about fabrication skills, please. Just tell me once, and then I'll let you alone for a week. I don't see myself as that. I see somebody that, for whatever reason, I found the time to do this. A lot of the people are a lot better money managers and had their priorities straighten out better than I did. I got obsessed with this thing.
So you go from, I really haven't put these pieces together like this. I know I've interviewed you in the past, but if I'm really kind of tracing the progression here, you go from a t-shirt to a world-changing build to the next step, which involves a polished stainless steel chassis, to you look at a 1959 milk tanker and think, I could turn that into a vessel that might be able to circumnavigate the globe.
Right.
So that's quite an escalation, sir. From a t-shirt to a milk tanker. Yeah,
right, true. I think this is the perfect time to insert the phrase, ignorance is bliss. If I had any idea what it would take or cost, you know, I probably wouldn't have done these things like this.
Yeah. So I'm looking at a picture of the milk tanker right now, and I look at this and I see something that I've seen, you know, thousands of times in my life. I don't think what might be, I think of what is. But you looked at it and you thought what might be. And coupled with the volume of stainless steel fabrication that you had just removed yourself from, you weren't daunted by the possibilities or by the magnitude of what it would take to turn this into a drivable and seaworthy vessel.
Rick Dobbertin's neighbors may think he's an astronaut, especially when a giant gleaming spaceship-like monster rolls out of the garage. The Dobbertin Surface Orbiter, 17,000 pounds of aluminum and stainless steel, able to navigate the roughest turf and the highest surf.
I like to look at something, not what it is, but what it could be. So a milk tanker seemed like an obvious starting point because it's stainless steel, so it'll hold up to the saltwater corrosion problems. And I figured if it would hold 30,000 pounds of milk inside, it would damn well keep the water out.
Rick spent years cutting, welding, and fabricating. Then Rick's voyage covered 33,000 miles in 28 countries. He survived a rickety bridge crossing in Costa Rica, was seized by Colombian guerrillas who just wanted their picture taken with the orbiter, and his monster became the first car to transit the Panama Canal.
This is just to say I did it. And now I can say I did it because I did it.
Talk me through how you look at a milk tanker and start to think, hey, I could make something out of that.
No, I don't know. I don't remember the name of the drug. No, just kidding. You can cut that out there. I don't know. It was just another step. It would be, when you really think about it, anybody that does this kind of stuff is not mainstream. There's something wrong. There's a screw loose, or there's a nut missing, or, a nut and bolt type thing, not a...
Right.
Because that wouldn't probably change your... Okay, we can cut that out, right?
I may. Yeah. Turns out I didn't, Rick. It was too good to cut.
Yeah. Anyway, I'd like to say something that a lot of people don't, and this is embarrassing to me, but I have been married 3 different times. The wife I am with now and forever is just great. She puts up with all my stuff, but the Nova J2000 and Orbiter never would have been possible without my first wife, Lonnie, standing behind me on this thing and helping and understanding, and then the Orbiter and my second wife, Karen. We spent too much time together in a confined space with life or death situations.
Mm-hmm.
All the time. That just wasn't going to last.
What you're looking at behind me is one couple's idea of marriage therapy. It's the Orbiter, a half car, half boat that Rick and Karen Dobbertin plan to take around the world. They hope the voyage would spice up their marriage, but as Jamie Colby explains, the two of them got more than they ever bargained for.
It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime, a romantic voyage around the globe. Africa, India, Australia, the Caribbean.
You only live once, so you might as well experience everything.
The exotic trip was this man's dream. Rick Dobbertin hoped it would put the spark back in his marriage. But Karen, his bride of 1 year, was certain it was just that, a dream.
Initially, you think, oh yeah, this is a great idea. Sure, honey, whatever.
But the 46-year-old master car craftsman wasn't joking, and he already had a plan. Rick and Karen would try to become the first couple to circumnavigate the globe. Not by boat, not by hot air balloon. No, in this. Rick called it the Orbiter. Once a milk tanker, Rick would spend 4 years, 14,000 hours, and the couple's life savings, transforming it into a high-tech land and water vehicle.
People would say as a joke, it's got everything but the kitchen sink, and I'd say it's got the kitchen sink too.
With no specific course to follow, on December 19, 1993, the Dobbertins bid a cheering crowd goodbye, embarking on the first leg of their trip, a drive from Syracuse, New York to Miami, where the Orbiter would be launched into the Atlantic.
And there were about 5,000 people there, and I think 4,000 of them were there to watch it sink.
But I've toned down a lot, and I've made a business out of this now, out of automotive stuff, instead of just spending time on a hobby. I did get some money out of these cars when I sold them, that was put back into the joint funds and all that kind of thing. But it's still, you really need to watch yourself and, get a happy medium in there on what you're doing for the people around you. I mean, it's not fair for them because they're not, getting all the positives out of the thing at the far end of it.
Right. And I think that's a great point, is that the things that you're aspiring to do are at a level that people that don't have the drive to see them through to completion, it's hard for people to understand that sometimes. And I've certainly encountered that with high achievers. Like I said, whether it's an Olympic or professional athlete that's training in a way or fueling their body in a way, or an artist maniacal in pursuing their craft to the point that they're isolating themselves from their friends and family. I mean, this is a manifestation of that same kind of drive to be the best. And in a lot of ways, it's fantastic. It's what leads to artwork like we've never seen and achievements that mankind has never witnessed. But at the same time, there's a darker side to that where you're so driven that you're neglecting other things, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Neglect is a good word. I mean, it's a horrible one to be filed under.
Yeah.
Everybody to a certain point is like that.
Yeah.
As soon as anything becomes an obsession, just try to back off a little bit. Right now, I've got my old Monza back, as I mentioned earlier, and I got it down more on the ground, different wheels and tires and stuff, so it looks pretty good. People, especially the younger generation here, cannot say the word Monza. They say, wow, what kind of car is that? It's a Monza. A Mazda? No, a Monza. In their lips, they're like looking down at their Monza. And I have my wife's hand-me-down car. It's a Mazda 3. I've got a couple kit car Mantas, and then I've got the Monza. So I've owned 3 cars that have 5 letters that start with the letter M and end with the letter A. It's just weird. I have to buy a Lamborghini Mira next to have a 4th one.
That sounds like a fantastic justification to add that to your stable.
Yeah, let me write that down.
There were internal fuel spills, radio malfunctions, and while they set a record as the first car to drive through the Panama Canal, Rick and Karen did run into trouble.
In Puerto Rico, we were stopped by the DEA, the FBI, the Coast Guard. They thought we were Colombian drug smugglers. In the frontier of Colombia, we were stopped by guerrillas who came out of the woods and flagged us down with their AK-47s.
Their one-year trip had turned into 3.5 years of grueling togetherness. By June of 1996, Rick and Karen were out of patience and out of money, leaving them no choice but to come home. The Orbiter was in pretty good shape, but the same couldn't be said for their marriage. Shortly after they got back, Karen filed for divorce.
So Project Earth Trek, this is, I do remember reading about this in the magazine. I'm a little older and still reading car magazines when I should probably be studying my homework, but we go from this king of Pro Street to this guy who has the ambition to build an amphibious vehicle to circumnavigate the earth over land and sea. And so this trip is obviously ambitious. I don't think that's a good enough word for it. But where did the idea come for something this big? I mean, we're not very many years removed from putting turbochargers on a supercharged car to building a milk tanker into something that is capable of driving and sailing around the world.
Well, it fell short on that. It worked, but it fell short on that. Well, that started with all the pro touring cars. The J2000, as you said, maybe kind of people said, I don't want to do anything like that. It's all for show. It doesn't drive it. And I got about 600 miles on the J2000. Most of them are street cruises and stuff like that. That shows it's drivable. But I get all these people that would say, you can't drive that thing. You get this blah, 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 and all that stuff. So I said, oh, yeah? Well, I'm going to build something, and you're going to be able to drive it anywhere you want. You'll be able to drive it on the land. You'll be able to drive it in the water. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's the ticket. And so I wanted to do something completely different. And it just seemed kind of like the time was right to, I don't know, do something like that. I got a job in Pittsburgh. This guy wanted a Corvette built for the show circuit. And so I lived in a motel 6 type environment for about 3 months. And we didn't part as buddies because he had some really strange ideas, and he was just playing with, if he said, I want to do this, and I said, no, that's not a good idea. Well, this is what I want to do. He wanted to put glass floors in the car all over, you know, not plexiglass or anything, but real good tempered glass so you could see the road go by when you went down the road. But the Orbiter, I worked at this place with this guy, and next door to his place was a tanker distribution thing, and I'd watch these tankers go in and out and all that kind of stuff. Well, that make a cool starting point for something, and you've got really the basic vehicle already done, front to back, stem to stern, whatever you're talking about, a car or boat. And the problem I didn't really address that I should have was these tankers are really heavy because they're double walled and they're heavy. Mm-hmm. So the Orbiter ended up weighing like 16,000 to 18,000 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, well, it didn't really affect it too much in the water. You know, the frame being open to the water and stuff, that was a lot of drag. And, you know, it worked good. It would go 10, 12 miles an hour in the water, and that's just at a high idle because I didn't want to break anything. Mm-hmm. The first time it went across from Florida to the Bahamas, it broke the input shaft on the transmission. I had to get towed back in. Mm. And while we're waiting, there's like 8 sharks circling the Orbiter, and I'm thinking, it's probably not a good time to dive off this thing. But they were just curious. They were sand sharks. I mean, they weren't, you know, vicious, you know, jaws coming out, snapping his thing. And it was just cool. Hey, look over there. There's an Orbiter.
Still, 8 sharks are still not something I'm looking to put myself in the middle of.
No, that's and you're always thinking of that, especially if you're not used to the ocean. Yeah. You know, and ignorance is bliss is another good example of this. I could have done it a lot differently and been more successful. Plus, you know, if I had that thing to go 25 or 30 miles an hour on the ocean, that would have been really nice because you just point it in the direction you want, and a wave can come along and turn you 90 degrees instantly. You got to swing it back forward.
So the trip ends up covering 30,000 miles on land, 3,000 miles at sea. I'm looking at a picture of you navigating this thing you built through the Panama Canal. And I've heard you tell this story more than once. And there's almost regret I hear in your voice, like I didn't do it. Like you didn't circumnavigate the globe. But you did something that no other human before or since in the history of mankind has ever done. And yet you view that, I think I'm accurate in saying you view that a little bit as failure. Talk me through that thought process.
Well, there was an Australian guy that tried to go around the world. He took a World War II Jeep that was an amphibious Jeep, and he got further across than I did, but it's nothing he built. And it was called Half Safe. And there's a book on it and everything. I have the book. And I didn't even know about it till I was done. And he said, another guy did that. And I thought, no, don't tell me that now. But he had to get picked up out of the water and put on a freighter once or twice. I think it might be just once. But so a lot of his trip across the big open thing was on the back of a freighter. Mm-hmm. I'm not putting him down because that was a hell of a thing to do anyway. But it wasn't a home-built Beverly Hillbillies kind of setup, you know?
Yeah, there it is again. It's that humility and that self-deprecation. Like, I want you to recognize the scope and the magnitude of what you've done, Rick. It's truly remarkable. And in many ways, it's been an inspiration to me in things that have nothing to do with what you did. But it shows that if you work hard, there are evidences to the contrary in our world today. Like you said, if a rich YouTube influencer wants an awesome new build, they just pull out the checkbook and they pay for it. Right. There aren't many people that are still doing these types of things on their own. And you're a testament to the fact that hard work is a great equalizer. You can do things and accomplish things just by teaching yourself these skills or investing all in. You weren't an aeronautical or nautical engineer, but you built a seaworthy vessel. And that's pretty doggone awesome.
Like I said, I'm going to have to call you when I'm depressed. Tell me how. I just don't see it because I'm at the level of where I'm at awe with the stuff people can do. I mean, it's especially the stuff now, it's just, I mean, the car that won the Riddler this year, oh my God, the 53 Vet, I wouldn't know where to start on something like that. And there's a lot of pro street guys and builders and that are just, I mean, I don't consider myself in the top, top thing, because I know what went into it, and I'm pretty much just an average person.
Let that last quote sink in for a sec, would you? This guy, who has built not one but two genre-defining, world-renowned, iconic cars that still draw a crowd today, 30 years later. I mean, for me as a kid, you could literally go to Walmart and buy a 1/4 scale model kit of Rick's J2000, a largely self-taught fabricator who managed to engineer, build, wire, plumb, and otherwise complete a stable of incredible builds, and then, not yet satisfied with just that recognition, decides to hand build and convert a 1959 milk tanker trailer into a fully operational road and seaworthy vehicle and attempt to circumnavigate the globe with only his then wife on the journey. That guy just spoke to me with all humility, a straight face, and deep conviction. Quote, "I'm pretty much just an average person." Unquote. If Rick Dobbertin is pretty much an average person, friend, then I think it's safe to say the rest of us better get to work. Because despite my above-average work ethic, I'm sure as heck not accomplishing Rick's level of, quote, pretty much average things, end quote. As remarkable and accomplished as Rick is, and as outrageous and outlandish and almost too crazy to believe as his stories of exploring the world, like Magellan with a TIG welder are, it's this humility, this deference, this willingness to see himself as just another guy that makes me not just inspired by Rick, but absolutely love, admire, and respect the heck out of him.
I think anybody that puts their mind to something, it's kind of like where there's a will, there's a way. I might have been able to accomplish something, but maybe a real professional could have done it in 1/3 the time at half the money, kind of thing.
So you wrap up the Orbiter excursion, we'll call it. I don't view it as a failure, and I know you learned lots of lessons along the way. I do remember the news story, and they point out that, like, as soon as you exited the vehicle, you end up with a divorce. I mean, it took its toll on you as a person, physically, emotionally. What were the months after the conclusion of the Orbiter trip like for you?
We went to Oshkosh with the Orbiter and went to the EAA show, Experimental Aircraft Association. It's the busiest airport in the world for that week. And it's Oshkosh, Wisconsin. You should look into it and look at all the cool stuff. Now the big thing is these drone type vehicles that'll, you can fly, like flying cars and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But he really lost interest in this kind of stuff and really got into airplanes when we went to that show. Mm-hmm. And then stuff just kind of went downhill, and I don't know, it's just, obviously it's a lot my fault because I'm the one that had this overwhelming thing in a marriage. It's not a good idea to put that in there. It's a threesome. It's a threesome's more fun if one of them's not a car or a car boat. In fact, I've been breaking down the Orbiter stories. When I was fabricating the car, in the driver's compartment in the cockpit of the Orbiter, there's a window on the bottom, and I needed that to be able to look down and verify if the drive shaft in the front was still turning. Because there was with no drag on it when you're in the water, when you launch, you're launching off front-wheel drive in the prop, and then you turn the transfer case to neutral for the front, so the wheels aren't turning in the drive shaft and all that stuff. So I wanted to put a window in there. It was like 12 by 16 inches. You could pop it open. There was a white stripe on the drive shaft, and it would tell you if it was still turning or not. So I got the thing cut, and I was getting ready to put the frame in, and I thought, I wonder if this thing could be a good escape hatch if you flipped over and you couldn't get out the top hatch, if you could unbolt this and climb out. So I'm in there, I'm all alone, it's the middle of the day, and I drop down through this hole, and I get about to the middle of my chest, and I'm stuck, and I can't go any further. So I come back up, and now I'm filling up the hole, and my belt is caught on this outside of the orbiter, and I'm trying to get back in so I can get out of the damn thing. So I can't do it. And I reach my belt buckle, and I undo my belt, and I drop my pants. And just then the UPS guy shows up. And here's the orbiter with these two naked legs sticking out, and he says, "Did I come at a bad time?"
It's been better.
I knew him, so we were laughing about it.
Yeah.
And I am stuck in this stupid thing. He goes, "Well, I hope you're not looking to me for help." But it was stuff like that made it fun. We pulled up into the Dominican Republic, and I got stuck trying to come out of the water. I mean, up to the axles. So the town got together and got a giant rope, and they had like a 60-man tug of war pulling the orbiter out of this muck, and up in the whole underside of it was just 5 inches thick of muck. And but this group of people just came out of nowhere. "Oh, we'll help you, you know, kind of. They were really nice, poor as they could be, but they were just really nice. And nothing made any difference. We weren't Americans. We weren't anything else. We were in there. We needed help, and they jumped in and helped us.
Yeah.
So when we're approaching the Dominican Republic, there's a P-3 airplane buzzing around over top of us, going around in circles with 3 engines running and 1 off. And we figured, you know, we didn't know what it was, but we figured it was not a U.S. plane, but actually it was a U.S. DEA plane looking for us. They made an experiment to see if they could track us from where we were before here, and we had lost them. So we spent some time with them, showing them our route and everything else. But when we were getting ready to leave the Dominican Republic, an official from the government came up and took us to the American Embassy area, not to the embassy itself, but to an area that he cordoned off, got us in there, took our passports, which was kind of scary, and then said, "Follow that guy, and he'll take you out of the town through back roads." So they took us out, got us on the highway, gave us passports back, and we headed to the other end of the country, where we ran into an American pizzeria, of all things. The guy was from Philadelphia. We parked out front, and then the newspaper came the next day, and he said, I remember him saying, "It's time to get out of Dodge." And I said, "Why?" He said, "These guys are protesting an American attack sub doing maneuvers in their waters." And I thought, "You got to be kidding." He goes, "No, and there's a picture of your car right there." And you know, we were just, so we left.
Yeah, right.
But everybody was nice. You know, I think everybody should travel out of their own comfort zone in the States. Now's not a good time. There's too much turmoil, but people are the same everywhere. They want their kids to have the most they can give. They want to eat well. They want a home. They want a job they like, and that's it. You know, it's too bad other stuff has to get in the way.
Yeah. So you mentioned the orbiter is going 8 to 10 miles an hour at sea. You're a guy that's been in the drag race scene. So I think I see a connection here where you've spent countless hours going really slow in the water, and you decide, hey, I want to build something that'll go a little faster in the water. What was the genesis for the amphibious vehicle, the hydrocar that you built?
Oh, I had built up a bit of a bank account, and I wanted someplace to throw it all away.
They say the happiest 2 days of a man's life are the day he buys a boat and the day he sells it. And the same could be said of sports cars. And you found a way to roll those together.
That's right. Yes. That's crazy. The orbiter was so slow, I wanted to build this thing, and it would have worked fine if I had not had such a steep angle on the front of the vehicle. So it was more of a displacement hull, pushing the water in front of it and around it than getting up on plane. Some of my friends wanted to hook a rope on the front of the hydrocar and then tie it off to another boat and pull it to where it gets up to speed and gets up on plane, and then cut the rope loose. And I never wanted to do that because I figured that'd be the only thing that anybody ever saw was this thing being towed by a boat, to go.
Right.
It just was, I don't know, it was just a bad design. It's funny, a lot of people don't hold me to that, and they think, "Oh, that's so cool," and all that, but I really don't have a real affinity for that vehicle.
Right. I mean, I'm looking at pictures. It's beautiful, and it kind of speaks to the fact that it's really difficult to do one thing really well. It's almost impossible to do two things really well. And I think about this all the time. My car's lowered to the ground, and it looks great, but man, it's hard to pull out of parking. You know, there are drawbacks to these things we do to make things perform better, or you know, the whole idea behind lowering a car's center of gravity so that it handles better on a perfectly flat racetrack. Well, I don't get to drive around a perfectly flat racetrack around town.
Right.
So there are compromises to taking things to their extremes and prices that we have to pay. I want to be conscious of your time. I mean, we're on an hour here, and I don't want to keep you all day. I know you've got other things going on. So since the hydrocar, you've been involved in entrepreneurial pursuits, and you've got a business today. So what's your day-to-day look like in 2024?
Let's see. I check my email, and there's usually nothing in it. And then the product I've come up with is a Corvette suspension adapter. If you want to put like a Corvette C5 or C6 suspension in your 65 Impala or something, you can buy the complete suspension on eBay. It's all aluminum. And then you buy one of our kits, which bolts on top of the cradle of the Corvette suspension, and it'll give you a spot to put a 2x4 frame right up front, and there's no brackets you have to put on. It's actually easier, or easy as putting like a 4-link or that sort of suspension in a car. And they're selling really good. I've never had a return. That's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, that's our shop. It's Dobbertin Performance. And we sold about 600 of them.
Yeah. You have the 90s S10 that.
Oh, right.
So that's made the show car scene with the Corvette engine mid-mounted. And now I'm looking at a picture of a go-kart with a Corvette engine where you've adapted that same application to something that weighs next to nothing and 500 horsepower. Right. It's got to be a blast.
It's not finished yet. That's my current project. It's a simple one. What I'm doing is, since the adapters are so adaptable to different things, I'm going to widen it about 10 inches and make a 2-seater out of it. And I bought one of the new GM V6 double overhead cam engines, which they've got a real bad reputation, like from the 2010s are junk, but the new ones are pretty good engines. So we're going to put that in transversely in the back. Still has 310 horsepower. The thing will weigh about 1,600 or 1,700 pounds, so it'll be quick. We'll have it, I believe we can make it convertible so it can be a 2-passenger or 4-passenger, because the 1-passenger one, nobody's interested in doing it. You at least want to grab your wife or your friend or a buddy or somebody and go somewhere with 2 seats.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be 2 seats, and it'll be available with the LS thing like that thing, only wider. And this V6 that we're trying now. It's really weird. This V6 has no mounting places for putting motor mounts on it. It's just been driving me nuts. And I've gone down to Chevy dealers, and they let me get under one in a lift and stuff. It's so overly complicated. You don't just put a pad on both sides and you're done.
Yeah.
So, but that's my day-to-day right now, is that. And we've got a couple other little inventions. I've got one I can't talk about yet, but it fits the genre of Spencer's stores. I don't know if you've ever been to a Spencer's store.
Yeah.
So you can. I can tell you, but not right now.
Okay.
But a couple of different things. I like to. We have a place now in Canastota, New York. Mm-hmm. And we ship all over. A lot of customers are using our adapters in Australia, Sweden, Germany. A lot of places. South America.
So the website is dobbertinperformance.com. I'll leave links to that in the show notes for people to check out. I got 2 questions left.
Okay.
What advice would you have for younger Rick, knowing what you know, having gone through what you've been through? What advice would you give?
No matter what you're building or what you're doing, keep the perspective on what it is. It's a project. It shouldn't overcompensate for your family's most important thing, and friends, and being healthy and stuff. and try to, if you don't get the thing done for this Street Machine Nationals, you got to wait another whole year because you got to take it easy, wait that extra year. I know that's easy to look back on and say now, and at the time you say, no, I got to get this done, I got to get it done. And then of course there's that your day starts out in the morning, and like one time with J2000, it's almost done. The day starts out in the morning, I drop the distributor in the back, and I go to turn it, and it's galled to the block. I can't move it. I can't get it to come out. I don't want to beat on it. I got to get the car up in the air, take the whole oil pan off, and take a little stick and bump it from the bottom. And it's like, it's a day, and of course, I let my moods get a hold of me too much. But just don't lose sight of what's important, I guess, is
right.
One thing.
Well, Rick, to your credit, I want to personally thank you, because I read the magazines and I was motivated by you and Matt and Scott and those types of things. And I did bite off more than I could chew. And I wanted to do a modern tribute to the work you all had done. And at some point, I really just realized I was in over my head. And the same person that inspired me to take on the project, your counsel was spot on. You said, you can't let this take over your life. My finances were struggling. It was taking a toll on all my relationships. And it does. To this day, it feels like failure, because it was. I didn't finish the task I set out to finish. But I emerged with some other more important things intact. And that was advice that you had given me. And so you're to blame and to thank for.
Well, it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
When you're right in the middle of something, and then some stupid thing or a part shows up, it's the wrong part, or should I take a break from this thing? Maybe things will look better. And now I'm older. I'm 72, and but I don't look it. I have to.
You don't?
Totally honest. I look like I'm 80. But it's a great ride, and I do have the business now, which is it's keeping us afloat. My wife works at Carrier Corporation, so she's, I guess, the breadwinner here. And she's just a great person. I mean, she puts up with me we've been married. Well, we got married in 2000, so we've been married 24 years.
Yeah.
So.
Well, shout out to her. I will leave an open invitation, sir. We barely scratched the surface of the fantastic stories that you have, from whether it's shipping the J2000 in the belly of an aircraft to all these. I mean, you are welcome back anytime, my friend. And I will plant the seed. What remains undone for you is we need a book about your life, sir. And I mean that with the, it's a bit of an assignment, but it is also a bit of an encouragement that your life and your stories, they need to be on paper for posterity's sake.
I appreciate it. I have come up with a title. I like to be challenged when I build these things, so it's not run of the mill,
Mm-hmm.
So I thought mechanically challenged.
It's perfect. It's perfect. All right. Well, Rick, I can't thank you enough for stopping by. Like I said, I'll drop the links so that people can go to your website. Last little bit, I always stitch this in. Just introduce yourself. My name is Rick Dobbertin, and I am undone.
My name is Rick Dobbertin, and I am undone.
Awesome. I'm thankful to Rick for dropping in, and I hope you enjoyed our conversation. For more info on today's episode, be sure to check it out on the web. Simply go to undonepodcast.com/EP105 to see the notes, links, and images related to today's guest, Rick Dobbertin. I know there are great stories out there to be told, and I'm always on the lookout. So if you or someone you know has a story that we can all be inspired by, tell me about it. Surf on over to undonepodcast.com, click that Connect tab in the top menu, and drop me a note. Coming up on the show, I've got a great new mini docuseries in the works about the Starter Corps. I'm thrilled to admit that this week I actually found one of those cool Charlotte Hornets new jackets, and it wasn't a scam. It's supposed to arrive tomorrow. I'll let you know how that ends up. But if all goes well, I've got Carl Banks, the owner of the Starter Corps, former number 3 overall NFL draft pick, member of the New York Giants Ring of Honor, and 2-time Super Bowl champion, on deck. This and more coming up on Becoming Undone. Becoming Undone is a Nitro Hype creative production written and produced by me, Toby Brooks. Tell a friend about the show. Follow along on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Becoming Undone Pod. And follow me at Toby J. Brooks on X, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Check out my link tree at linktr.ee/Toby J. Brooks. Listen, subscribe, and leave me a review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Till next time, keep getting better. What I'm wishing you built right now is a noiseless leaf blower. I want to chime in, and every time I do, this guy is right outside my window cranking up this.
So why is he there so long?
Well, they weed eated first. Now he's got the leaf blower going to blow it all out.
Oh, okay.
So hopefully.
Yell out, shove that thing up your...
As soon as I think he'll head. Yeah, he's almost done by me here.